Hey guys, so today I want to talk about the book Political Tribalism by Amy Chua. Before I get into that, I want to apologize. I know it's been a little while. I have been busy. You may be able to guess from this structure right here. I actually don't know what memorial it is, but I'm in DC right now. Can't really talk about why I'm here, but I am in DC. The Washington Monument's over there. Anyway, I apologize. Now let's get into the video. So the very first line of Amy Chua's book is, "Humans are tribal." And this is something that we know to be true. Whether or not it's good or bad, it is simply a part of human nature that humans want to belong to a group. They want to belong to something bigger than themselves, whether that's a country or a race or some random Facebook group about monkeys wearing banana hats. God knows where I got that from. But we want to belong to some kind of group. And that's a very important part of our psychology. It's not something that we can easily get around, no matter how individualistic we may want to be. And this is a very critical thing not to overlook, and it's something that Amy Chua says we have overlooked countless times in foreign policy. One of the examples she gives is the war in Iraq. We completely underestimated the conflict between the Shias and the Sunnis. I mean, it's certainly not something that I know a lot about, but the military brains at the time thought we could just go in there and that the conflict between those two groups wouldn't be too much. And they were very much wrong. It's because in some part, Americans overlook ethnic identities, often to a fault in our foreign policy. The same thing happened, as cited in the book, with the war in Vietnam. In Vietnam, the Vietnamese hated the Chinese. And not only that, not only did they hate the Chinese, but the Chinese were synonymous with capitalism. Okay? This Chinese were synonymous with capitalism. So when we came in there marching, preaching capitalism, all they thought about was these Chinese people who had all the wealth in Vietnam and who they hated and who were capitalists. So we, in going into this war, we put ourselves on the side of the Vietnamese enemy. We put ourselves on the side of the enemy. It's no wonder that we couldn't get anything done in Vietnam. So the point being from those two botched conflicts is that because we didn't take into account ethnic conflicts, one between the Shias and the Sunnis, one between the Vietnamese and the Chinese, we went in there like a bull in a china shop, and in some ways made things worse. That's why democracy, as Chua notes in the book, doesn't always work, because then you can just have, democracy, our founders used to use the phrase, the tyranny of the majority. And if you have two groups that are fighting each other, then all the democracy is going to do is exacerbate those conflicts, because then you're just going to have whichever one has 51% ruling over the other 49%. And those tensions are just going to flare up even more than perhaps they already were. So democracy, while it sounds great, doesn't always work when there's an embedded ethnic conflict. Now, one of the real keys about this book, and it's something I've been thinking about lately, is this notion of America as a supergroup. That's a term that Chua coins in the book. And what she means by this is a group that is capable of encapsulating other groups. So, for example, Christianity, right? You can have a Christian of different races, of any race, really, and they will be welcome into the tribe that is Christianity. Okay, so it's a fairly common thing with religions, but it is less common with countries. I mean, just imagine, you have someone in France, right, who immigrated from Africa. Would you call them a French African? That's what we say here. We say an African American or an Asian American. In France, you don't have that. In the UK, you don't have that, because America is uniquely capable, as a brand, or as whatever you want to call it, as a tribe, of encapsulating other groups within it. You can be someone who has African heritage, but is an American. You can be someone who has Asian heritage, but is an American. That is not something that is as common in other countries. In fact, it's almost non-existent in other countries, and this is a very important aspect of America. Presidents throughout time, Woodrow Wilson, Teddy Roosevelt, there's another one that she cites in the book. Regardless, many presidents throughout time have said that basically anyone who identifies as any particular group other than American is essentially doing it wrong. You're not fully embracing the culture of America. But to be clear, this idea of a supergroup is not meant to eradicate smaller groups within it. It's meant to be an umbrella term that includes all of these smaller groups. So you can be an American and you can be Christian or Jewish or Muslim or any of these things. You can be black or white or any of these things. You can be an American and also be part of all these smaller tribes within the umbrella tribe of America. And that's a very, very important thing. Sorry, there's bugs here. Look, this is DC. Regardless, whatever Donald Trump says, this place is a swamp. I'm telling you, it's 95 degrees out here. That's how much I love you guys. I'm sweating like a hooker in church because it's 95 degrees out. Anyway, we should get back to the content, eh? So this notion of America being a supergroup is incredibly important because it's a way to unite people who would otherwise be at odds with each other. If in Iraq, right, they have the Shias and the Sunnis, if Iraq was a strong supergroup that was capable of uniting them, that the Shias could appeal to the Sunnis' Iraqi identity, and vice versa, you could use the supergroup of Iraq to bring people together. That's not something you can do in Iraq. It's not something you can do in almost any country except for America. And this is especially important now because, as I mentioned in another video, there is a strong anti-American sentiment amongst the left, and I think this is incredibly foolish. We've seen civil rights leaders, right, like Martin Luther King, like Frederick Douglass, who, I don't know, appropriate, I say that word with fondness in this case. They draw on our history, on our heritage of the Constitution, of, when Martin Luther King gave his speech, he said there was a blank check that was written, right? And he was drawing on our Constitution, on our founding documents. He was drawing on the shared heritage of all Americans. He wasn't, it's a common postmodernist thing to just trash every existing system because everything is clearly so terrible here. But smart civil rights leaders, smart leaders of any kind, draw on the shared heritage of a group of people, in this case Americans. The point being that it is smart to appeal to that sense of American identity, especially when you're trying to bring people together, because it's an umbrella tribe. This is not to say that you should embrace your American identity over whatever other identities you may have. I identify as a ginger, okay? That is my #1 identity, okay? It's just a fact. But it is to say that we should not forget and we should not tarnish the American identity. We should rebuild the brand of America. And I know for some people that's really tough right now because you fucking hate Trump or you fucking hate Hillary. Oof. Anyway, so much cursing too. Anyway, I get it. It's tough right now. And it's going to take a lot of leadership on both sides to get over that. But we can't keep ruining the supergroup that is America, because it is a way that we can unite people who are clearly divided. Republicans, Democrats, blacks, whites, whatever. We're clearly a divided nation. We are very polarized, more than we've been almost since the Civil War, I think, from some of the studies that I've read. And we need to go back to appealing to that shared American identity, to that shared heritage, so we can unite people of disparate groups. We can use the umbrella, the American tribe. Okay, that's a lot of ranting. Let me see if there's anything else I want to talk about from the book. All right, so here's just a couple cool things that I found in the book. One of them, Occupy Wall Street. Vast majority of people who were in Occupy Wall Street were not poor. It was a group that was meant to represent the poor, and you could totally argue that it did and that it brought the topic of inequality to the forefront of people's minds. But the vast majority of people who were in Occupy Wall Street, not poor, very privileged, and generally speaking. So there's this thing called the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel is it's a religious movement that essentially teaches people to pray for money. Okay, one of the fastest growing movements in America. People are just praying for money left and right, and they think it's going to come to them. Same kind of people who voted for Donald Trump, and I'm saying that literally, not whatever. You understand what I'm saying. More cool facts. Okay, so here's the other key thing that Chua discusses in our book. There are all these tribes under the umbrella tribe of America, right? White people, black people, poor people, rich people, all of these little tribes that people belong to. And the problem right now is that for a long, long time, right, white people had it pretty good, kind of hard to deny that. Not me, I was Polish, I wasn't considered white when my ancestors came here, but white people, right, they had it pretty good for a while, so they felt pretty safe. The interesting thing now, and the disconcerting thing now, is that white people, the majority of them, feel that they are one of the most oppressed groups in America. Obviously, black people still feel that way. Obviously, other minorities still feel that way. And so that is what's causing a lot of tension right now is that there is no group, okay, no identity that feels safe. Everyone feels threatened. And when people feel threatened, they retreat further into their group. They don't go venture out to, help out other groups. They have to protect themselves. They have to protect their tribe, okay? And no one feels safe right now. White people don't feel safe. Black people don't feel safe. And, however rational you want to say any of those fears are, it doesn't change the fact that people feel that way. And the more they feel that way, the more tension that can create, all the more reason we need to go appeal more to this broad identity that unites people together. Okay, this one is really disconcerting. I didn't know if this was true or not. I heard rumors, of course, but hate crimes are up 20% in the wake of the 2016 election. I don't know what else to say other than that's sad, and going on to the next one. So this is a quote I'm just going to read to you guys from a dad, I think. So, quote, "My college-age daughter constantly hears talk of white privilege and racial identity, of separate dorms for separate races. Parenthetically, somewhere in heaven, Martin Luther King Jr. is hanging his head and crying," end parentheses. I hate identity politics, but when everything is about identity politics, is the left really surprised that on Tuesday, millions of white Americans voted as, quote, white? If you want identity politics is what you get. All right, so this is a quote from Woodrow Wilson. "You cannot dedicate yourself to America unless you become in every respect and with every purpose of your will thorough Americans. You cannot become thorough Americans if you think of yourselves in groups. America does not consist of groups. A man who thinks of himself as belonging to a particular national group in America has not yet become an American." Again, just speaking to that sense of we all appeal to this super group of America. Guys, can you see? I'm like glistening with sweat. Again, 95 degrees here in the swamp that is DC. Okay, so this was an interesting fact. No other major power in the world has ever democratically elected a racial minority head of state. America gets a lot of shit for how racist and sexist and homophobic and xenophobic we are. And in some ways that is totally deserved, but in other ways we are, relative to other nations, we don't always do so bad. Okay, also an interesting fact, I'm going to quote directly from the book here. Between 1820 and 1914, more than 30 million people arrived in the United States, the largest human migration in the history of the world. For purposes of comparison, between 1871 and 1911, some 20 million immigrants arrived in the United States, while over the same time frame, Argentina and Brazil together received 6 million. Australia and New Zealand, 2.5, and Canada, fewer than 2 million. America has welcomed millions of immigrants from across the world throughout the decades, the centuries, and they have made us better. Let's not forget that. Let's just not forget that, okay? Oh, okay, so one thing that the author says is incredibly important is that in America we have birthright citizenship. I haven't done a lot of research into this issue, but the basic point that she makes is that because we have birthright citizenship, being an American isn't tied to your blood or your race or anything but the fact that you live and were born in America. That is the only thing that matters, and it's a beautiful thing in a lot of ways. So here's some interesting psychological research. Our brains, apparently, what this research suggests is are hardwired to value and individualize in-group members, while, quote, out-group members are processed as interchangeable members of a general society. So in other words, you care about your tribe, you don't really give a fuck about other tribes. That is something that is embedded and hardwired into our brains, which is why it's important to have tribes that encompass as many people as possible and don't, bifurcate society, probably not the right word there, but, divide society up into all these tiny little pieces and just, get angry at each other all the time. Okay, now here's going to be some interesting sociological facts. There was this one study cited in here that showed that when people were asked a question, I think the question they used was whether or not banning guns would increase the rate of crimes, okay? And participants weren't provided with any data or anything like that. It was just a question of whether or not banning guns would increase the rate of crime, okay? And obviously people on the left assumed, and you had to rate it on a scale, assumed that the crime rate would go up if, or I'm sorry, the crime rate would go down, specifically the homicide rate, I suppose. The crime rate would go down if you banned guns, and people on the right thought that the crime rate would go up if you banned guns. Again, this is just showing the biases people have. But what was interesting is that the smarter people were, okay, the higher they scored on like IQ tests or whatever thing they used for the study, the smarter people were, the more it exacerbated their biases. So if you were really smart and you were on the left, you thought that banning guns would like make world peace, okay? And if you were really smart and you were on the right, you thought that banning guns would lead to like fucking chaos. So the smarter that you were, the more exacerbated your biases were. Very interesting. Smart people, you know, there's some downsides to being smart. There's another study mentioned here. It's a very popular one. Basically, if you're in a group of people, and in this case these people are actors, and you know there's a question asked and you know the right answer to the question, but everyone else answers wrong, most people, like 75%, will also answer the question wrong to fit in with the group. But when asked privately, they will answer it right. So very interesting the way a group, like again, a tyranny of the majority kind of thing. John Stuart Mill talked about this, like a social pressure. But groups can implicitly force people, whatever, make people say things they don't necessarily believe just through sheer force of peer pressure. Okay, so that is, it's not the entirety of the book. I would encourage you to all go read it. Again, Political Tribalism by Amy Chua. I'll link down below. Dave Rubin also did a great interview with her and someone else. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But it's a great book. I read it in like 2 days, loved it. Again, the key point here, the key thesis, I guess, is that humans are tribal, okay? And that one of the ways we can overcome that tribalism is by empowering supergroups that allow other tribes to be within the tribe. So America, the supergroup, don't want to block my pretty face. America, the supergroup, and then you have all these groups underneath. And we need to go back to prioritizing, to emphasizing this shared American identity that we all have. And I'm inclined to agree with that. So thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Go check out the book. Yeah, let me know what you think of DC. I don't know, I'm in DC right now. What do you think about this stage I got going on here? Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Love you all. Have a wonderful 4th, and I'll see you next time.